Hello, hello. Sorry for the delay. My computer decided it was out of battery. Okay. Today is going to be a good session. I'm just waiting Facebook land. And then I will flip this out. If you are joining me, I am in the middle of a severe thunderstorm watch, which is pretty much a blanket statement, it seems, every day here, but we have had some power issues. So if all of a sudden I disappear, it may be to a power surge or something of that nature. So just stay tuned. Okay. Thank you for your patience. Okay. So today's about common questions, and I have a few of mine that I'm going to start with today, but obviously I'm sure you may have some of your own. Perfect. So this is going to be, I think, a two-part session. Depending on how today goes, it may end up being three. But today I thought I would start very briefly, not so much from the how do I do it or how long or how do I do that perspective. I want to do more for those of you that are, in the beginning stages. You're looking at this technology, you've heard this, you've heard that, you're dealing with something. So I want to take this back to more of a level of basic understanding. And next week, we're going to get a little bit more into the specific benefits, how to accomplish them, how long to use it, new user things that you may be experiencing. But today I want to talk about more the factual sides. I've got a couple of different plate examples. If you're looking at vibration plate technology, what's the best one for you? So hopefully some of the questions that I'm going to raise today will address that. First question for users: should I do it barefoot or not? I did a post earlier this week, and every day I get about 5 or 6 new comments on that one. It's most things on a vibration plate really boil down to preference, your own preference in how it feels and what you're trying to accomplish. So I'm just going to hop to comments here quick. I just wanted to make sure my head wasn't cut off. Hello, Tina. Hi, Vicki. Nice to see you. Perfect. I'm assuming you can see and hear me. Otherwise, somebody would be saying, Debbie, we can't hear you. We can't see you. I'm trying to decide if my lights are too bright. Probably. I upped my readers to a stronger strength today, and I'm like, everything's like bigger. So today I have 2 Lifepro plates, but 2 very different models. I've got the Pulse, which we've had very, very many questions about. And then I've got my handy dandy old workhorse, my Rumblex Plus model. This is the second model that I received from Lifepro when I first started working on some training for them 5 years ago. And so this would be considered a combo machine. This is a singular moving machine with other features. So if all of those terms so far kind of go, what does all that mean? Today's going to be a good session for you. So I've got about 5 different kind of topics I want to talk about that are very common when you first start researching this, or maybe you've been researching this for too long. The pros and cons of searching online: you have unlimited resources at your fingertips as far as information. The downside is there's a lot of opportunistic feeders out there, Nita's term, friend of mine, that will plague upon the benefits or that you're trying to find, or maybe some of the medical issues that you're dealing with. And there's lots and lots of different companies out there selling lots and lots of different machines. So without being too brand specific, take this higher level. We're going to talk about vibration plate, the industry, for a very briefly little moment here. Oops, out of focus, interested. Sometimes, I walk away, I think too fast. So maybe I'll just walk back slow and make sure things don't get all fuzzy. Thank you for letting me know, because sometimes I get rambling and I don't see that I look like a fuzzy Q-tip on the other end there. So the first thing we want to talk about is safety. Are these things safe? Who should be using them? Who shouldn't? What do I need to know? And I'm going to be very bold. I put myself out there with a lot of different terminology, certainly a lot more confidence than some people promoting vibration plates. And it comes from a place of very extensive experience. I've specialized in vibration plates for almost 20 years in medical grade originally, because that's all that existed. I've been doing this before eBay, deal sites, Amazon, any of that existed. So there are two main types of machines. And before I get into the different types of machines, we're going to stick on safety a little longer, because one of the most common debates right now on the internet, and this changes depending on what the marketing pitch is from company to company, but the biggest debate right now is one movement type or one type of machine is better or safer than the other type. And to be honest, it's all BS. There are different types of movement. There are thousands of different vibration plates in today's modern world. And in almost 50, 60, honestly, 70 years of research, nobody has ever more than over-exercised themselves. There's lots of ways you can over-exercise yourself, but we don't always relate that to a vibration plate. A vibration plate accelerates exercise benefits. It reduces the amount of time that you have to spend doing traditional activities. It reduces the amount of impact that you are exposing your body, your joints to. So all that a vibration plate is a tool to make exercise more effective in less time. And so the exercise piece, from a safety perspective, is exercise safe? Generally speaking, it's not going to be a yes or no answer for everything that comes out of my mouth. But yes, activity is generally safe and recommended for most people on the planet. To what degree you are exercising, what type of exercise, how often, how long, all those same questions that you guys drill me with about vibration plates are the same for activity. And generally when we ask these types of questions, are they safe? Can I overdo it? Can I break a bone? I have been, the things that I've heard on the safety side, I want to assure you right here, right now, they are stigmas. Just because you heard something on a site or read it in a comment doesn't mean that it didn't happen or it's not true. But no one ever asks, well, what did you do on the machine? How long did you do it for? Are you appropriate to be using a machine? So a lot of times when you hear bad stories or things that are associated with vibration plates or activity, no one really digs into further, explanation as to why or how it occurred. Any overactivity or any negative experience that you have had on a vibration plate or read somebody else having on a vibration plate, I can almost guarantee was related to overuse. Overusing it, there are a couple of ways that you can overuse it. The number one way that people overuse it is they go too long and they take on too much intensity. And I'll break that down when we get into movement types, because intensities are different between movement styles. One is controllable by you, the user. The other is not. It's a preset. So sticking with safety for just another minute longer. For those of you that are listening to me or watching this later recorded going, oh, no, I read this, or there's a study, or yada, 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 bring it on over. If you have a study, or if you have a claim, an article, anything out there that I can dig into further and take a closer look, just making a statement or a comment about something you heard one time at a barbecue, it doesn't leave me anything but frustrated, because now I need to, it's something I'm actually kind of crazy about, because I am not medically trained, and I probably support more medical conditions in the vibration plate world than most doctors and hospitals, because I've been doing it longer and I support them in using them. So there's always a way that a plate can be appropriate for almost anyone to use by modifying how you are using it or what you are doing on it position wise. So if there are any safety concerns out there and you would like me to address those, certainly when I get to questions, I'll ask you to post those. But if you do have a link or something a little bit more substantial, to expand on that very briefly, any articles, any studies, any claim, a lot of us are not so great for reading past the title. So if you do read past the title, very often, when you hear vibration causes this or vibration is harmful for that, we need to step a little further back and explain the vibration piece and not assume that it's a vibration plate. Very commonly, any harmful effects that are associated scientifically to vibration that are being shared on the internet are more related to occupational vibration exposure, which is, just like the word sounds, occupational, something that's happening on the job. Maybe you are an equipment operator and you're working with equipment that vibrates, tampers, jackhammers, these types of things. Maybe you are a long haul truck driver and you're bouncing in the seat of your truck for 8, 12, 14 hours a day. Any of the harmful effects associated to occupational vibration exposure, and there are many out there, there are guidelines. This is an industry thing. But they're not a vibration plate. And the biggest difference between them, aside from operating frequencies, so the frequencies that vibration plates work in are very different than the frequency that you are exposed to in an equipment environment. So, jackhammers, tampers, those type of things, they're 80, 100, 200 hertz, whereas vibration plates do not operate at those frequencies. Secondly, it's time of exposure. When you're using a vibration plate, and this is a common question I will address next week, how long can I use it? Why can I only go half an hour? Why does my machine only go 15 minutes? Again, it accelerates exercise effects. So the goal of the machine is to reduce the amount of time. Yet everybody thinks they can go longer and longer and longer and longer. You can't go 8 to 10 hours a day. I do have some people that probably have from a symptom management perspective, but if you overdo it on a vibration plate, you're going to start feeling kind of the opposite effects of what you're trying to accomplish. You're going to have muscle soreness. You're going to have fatigue. You may be peeing or pooping excessively, which is a benefit for actually a lot of people. But this machine turbo boosts lymphatic circulation. There's lots of different things that occur. And if you're actually applying yourself and doing squats and push-ups and those type of things, the muscle soreness may present the next day. So if you're really, really sore on a vibration plate, for those of you that are disciplined, that have, fitness technique and know how to do proper positions, the vibration plate is going to make it more challenging. It's going to contract the muscles. You're going to fatigue quicker. So you don't need to do as much time if you're applying yourself. If you're really, really sore, you probably have overdone it. A couple minutes on the plate is going to help you recover, which is what they're also very effective at. If you feel you have had more than over exercise after using a vibration plate, reach out, tag me at Debby with a Y. I will happily have that conversation. I have many people that, do these flyby comments. Well, it blew the screws out of my knee replacement, or, it dislodged 3 discs in my spine. But no one ever wants to continue the conversation. They want to make the accusation that the plate has caused this problem. But I'll tell you right now, over exercise, overdoing it, so if you're going to go 10 minutes with your feet as wide as possible, which is max intensity, there's a clue, and you're going to do it 4 times that day and wonder why you're hurting the next day or your bad knees giving you trouble, apply a little common sense, please. So I don't want people hurting themselves. And as good as it feels while you're using the machine, because there's a lot of pain relief, a lot of symptom management it gives you, be cautious in starting out, and I don't mean slow speed. I would like you to be conservative, and I'll get into what a conservative start is a little bit more detailed next week, but I will drop a video for you that are curious this week. But starting out, safety there, whether it's this type of machine, that type of machine, we're going to get into that as well briefly today. They are safe. Any harm that is done is lack of reading directions or seeking advice. If you're dealing with chronic issues, I highly, highly advise you be conservative in your time and your intensity. And understand where you're physically starting. If you're terribly deconditioned, very frail, you suffer from fatigue, you should ease into this very much so. But if you do overdo it, you will recover. And in my experience in 20 years dealing with some pretty intricate medical conditions, and I support users as young as 6 months post-surgery, there are no ill effects other than you doing more than maybe your body is prepared to handle. Okay? So I'm going to move on now to contraindications, because there are some. Thank you for those of you that are joining me. I'd love to hear someone's recommendation for knee amputees. Sandy, you're probably talking to one of the few people on the dealt with a lot of amputees, and there's so many wonderful things. I'll get into that when I get to the questions portion. But yes, there's lots of ways. If you struggle exercising or doing traditional activities for any reason, a vibration plate is a really good tool to sort of bridge the gap, get you back to some of those activities. I'll ramble shortly. You got me excited with your question. So contraindications. In my experience, my personal experience as a vibration plate specialist, not vibration contraindications listed in Lifepro's manual or on their site. Lifepro is a company. They're one of the best companies out there when it comes to home. You know what? They are the best company. I don't recommend many, but in the home category where available, I recommend Lifepro for two very important reasons. They have a lifetime warranty, which is a huge deal. Regardless of where you're purchasing it through Amazon, them directly, you are covered. Secondly, they're there after the sale, or I wouldn't be here lecturing you today. I love Lifepro because they want to serve their clients to the best of their ability, but they don't spend all day, every day coaching intricate medical conditions and supporting users as some of us have. So what my contraindications are may be different than Lifepro's. They might be different than what you've read at the Mayo Clinic. They might, the contraindications, and I'm going to break that word into two parts. Contraindication. They're not contra, do not do. They're not contra, cannot do. They're an indication that you should seek further clarity. So if you have a contraindication on anyone's list, Lifepro's, mine, it doesn't necessarily mean, oh, no, you'll never be able to use this. Maybe there's a period in time that you cannot use it, or maybe there's a period of time that you modify how you use it. Maybe you're sitting in a stool because you're unable to stand because the vertigo is so bad, or maybe you just had a shoulder surgery. Well, maybe today's not the day to get back to push-ups. So again, it's just a tool that helps accelerate exercise benefits. What exercise positions you should and can be doing on the plate is completely an individual conversation. I hope that makes sense. So let's narrow this conversation down, and I will post 2 lists of contraindications in the comments, and I want you guys to look at both. But Lifepro, they're providing and selling machines worldwide. They've got to be ultra conservative, because in today's world, you're not allowed, even though you may know and have the experience, you have to be so careful talking online. You can't be giving medical advice. So they can offer some guidance and direction, but ultimately, if you are dealing with a chronic issue or something that, is considered a medical concern, you should be talking with someone not only versed in your situation, be that your care provider, your PT, your doctor, whomever, but in a perfect world, they'll be versed in vibration plates. And that's where some of you get stuck. Maybe you've been using a plate for a while and you've got experience and your doctor says no, but your brain is going, well, couldn't I just sit on a stool? Like, we can make modifications, and sometimes we've got to be our own advocates and seek better, more qualified information. I do not want to contradict what your doctors are saying, but I will happily provide better information to help both of you make an informed decision. So on my list of contraindications, I really honestly only have one that I kind of go, wait a minute, let's talk a little bit further. If you're dealing with anything, one simple use of a plate or a couple of tries, going for a walk or two isn't going to cause long-term damage. But long-term, if you're looking at investing in this equipment, the only concern or red flag that I want to have a further discussion on is currently right now, you are dealing with blood clots or a condition that puts you at risk of developing them. Not saying you cannot use a vibration plate, but I do want to stress very heavily in today's session, the approach to using your plate, you need to be responsible and adhere to the advice that your doctor has already provided, which is very likely no vigorous or long enduring activities. You don't want something that's going to move large capacities of blood volume until you kind of get an idea with what your body is capable of sustaining. So this comes to one of my later questions, stigmas. Vibration plates do not cause blood clots, okay? They do present the ability to potentially move them or dislodge them if you are overdoing your use. So if you're dealing with a known blood clot right now, or you're at high risk, or you're just in a medical situation where you're figuring out, what you should and should not be doing, keep your intensity minimal as well as your time. It's okay for you to be active. You should be active. And in many ways, a vibration plate is an amazing tool for anything cardiac because of how effective it is at moving circulation. But if you are dealing with blood clots, I just want you to be conservative and have that conversation, not about a vibration plate, but with your care provider. I need to be active. Are there things I should be avoiding? Are there activities? Generally speaking, it's going to be, lower to mid intensity, keep the durations light, and those same principles would be applied to the plate. So more frequent sessions, shorter. A lot of you are going, but there's bazillion others. Every other contraindication that you could ever imagine is a depends to me, not a no. And there's one more I will briefly touch on, which is pregnancy or really any new medical condition that has presented. I don't care if it's a hip replacement, you've been in an accident. If you are an existing user or you are a new user, you need to modify and tailor what you're doing on the plate to the position that you are in currently. So if you're pregnant, this is kind of a depends. I use this story all the time when I used to work at trade shows. And, if you've been using your plate for a long, long time and you're working out on it and everybody in the family's in on it, and this is not a new thing to your body, but you become pregnant, should you stop using it? That is the question. Well, if you were a runner or a triathlete or a snowshoer or a swimmer, would you stop your activities because you've become pregnant? Probably not. Unless there's some high risk situation, that's a conversation that you would probably have with your doctor. So, I'm now pregnant and I'm expecting what's appropriate for activity. Is there things I should be doing? Is there things I should not be doing? Are there certain exercises or stretches that I should be focusing on? And sometimes that changes throughout your term. So if you are an existing vibration plate user, it's so funny the questions I get. If you're an existing user, you're going to ask me something like, well, is it okay to use my plate again? Like almost desperately, because you miss it. You know how good it feels. You know what it's going to do for that circulation in the legs. If you've had more than one kid, the varicose veins, a lot of the reasons you started using it and are gaining relief from it, kind of comes into your mind. And what you have when you're pregnant and you have experience using a vibration plate, you have experience, the fear, the confidence in how to use and modify settings is very different than if you're a brand new user. So for those that ask me, can I use a vibration plate if I am pregnant or thinking of becoming pregnant? There's some newbie stuff you got to go through. Not saying medically, I've never seen any evidence of or study, of inactive women versus women becoming active for the first time, becoming, it's probably out of my scope of understanding and time frame. But I trained through my pregnancy. I compare everything first kid to second kid. First kid, I wasn't using the plates. I didn't have a clue what a vibration plate was. My daughter, I'd been using them 7 years at that point. And as much as I initially kind of went, oh my goodness, my body went, well, what's wrong? We need our shake. We got to get our thing done. My body was conditioned for this sport. So, you may need to change how you're using it and keep that dialogue going with your care providers. But if you are an experienced user and you become pregnant and you would like to use your vibration plate, and in my opinion, and who I will support, it really depends on your experience and, your pregnancy and how that progresses. So it really is, just to keep an eye, like any activity, you probably would modify what you're doing throughout the course of your term. But it really boils down to a confidence thing. If you are dealing with anything that presents risk throughout the course of your pregnancy and you're a new user, honestly, there's just too much new, and gosh forbid anything may happen. You don't have the understanding or the confidence. Your body isn't as conditioned. So you're going to be fearful of the machine, and I don't want you in that situation. So if you're a brand new user and you have a machine and you just found out that you're pregnant, feel free to reach out. But seated generally is okay. Keeping in mind what one of the things you learn as a new user is how to modify the positions. When you're a brand new user, you may not even be aware that you can sit in a stool. A lot of people think you're supposed to just stand on it. So it really depends on your level of understanding. The modifications absolutely can be done. I hope that makes sense. It's a bit of a long one today, guys. Thank you for being patient with my ramblings. So let's move on to movement types. I know I've only listed 2 contraindications, and many of you are going, Again, the contraindications on a vibration plate really are kind of the same as exercise. If there's anything you are supposed to be doing or not supposed to be doing, you're in a medical situation, you'll already have had that doctor discussion about activity. The plate is just a tool to make activity easier and more effective in less time. I hope that makes sense. So have those conversations. And if you do need some additional information because your care provider is not versed, absolutely reach out. So 2 movement types. I take a lot of grief over this. There are 2 very heavily researched, very studied movement types. The first, the primary, the foundational movement that started it all is oscillating, also known as pivotal, also known as side alternating. I'm sure there's other terms out there, but oscillating is essentially mimicking that movement we make as we step across the floor. Now I want you all to go back to grade 5 when you were 5 or 6 years old on the playground, and you were playing on the teeter-totter with your friends. You'd have 2 on the end of the teeter-totter, and there'd always be 1 or 2 hanging out in the middle. Well, if you think back to that teeter-totter, you know that if you're standing in the middle, you're moving, but you don't really feel it. But if you're out here, everything's shaking. Every loose piece of skin on my body is shaking under this sweatsuit right now. And wide, everybody thinks this is kind of plays into my stigmas. Wide is better. Show me that study. Send me that article. That is a big stigma. Wide is more movement. Wide is more impact. Wide is for many not a very good starting position. Most people out there, believe it or not, are dealing with something. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sitting here listening to me ramble at this point. I want you to think more functional. I want you to move and feel better before you even think about fitness. So in oscillating, what's so cool is you have all these little micro movements over the intensity. You decide how strong it feels. Not me, not Lifepro. For what you are doing personally at the time, where your body, where your deficiency is, you kind of got to figure out what your tolerance is. Doesn't mean that's where, this is where I feel the best and I'm committed here forever. No, you'll progress. Maybe you'll be doing different things. But the number one lesson and the number one advantage that oscillating movement offers is you are ever in control over your experience. The amplitude, the intensity of movement is adjustable. So, this would be one way that maybe you've become pregnant and you're 8-9 months in, and this isn't necessarily so appropriate anymore. So that's the biggest modification that nobody really talks about. Everybody talks about frequency or machine type or what everybody else knows because they're an expert because they read it on some forum. Oscillating movement is wider at the edges, closer at the middle, and in complement with that is your speed factor, your hertz. So how wide or how close is how much you're moving with each movement of the plate. The speed in oscillating, I like to complement, starting out, a closer foot position with a bit of a faster speed. And I'm going to get into more detail next week, but I couldn't stand my choppy voice. So you'll find with a closer foot placement, a little faster speed is less terrifying. I've had it described as that, but it's smoother. The faster you're moving, the more it kind of feels like vibration versus this Bosu ball experience, okay? The other type of movement is vertical. Vertical, honestly, it doesn't really exist anymore, and I'm going to take a lot of grief over that. A lot of the studies that many of you are quoting, 40 hertz is best for bone density and vertical is best for this, or there's companies out there and groups online that make some pretty big claims that it is better. It's different. One is not superior to the other. There's really actually been very few side-by-side comparison studies of a medical grade oscillating plate and a medical grade vertical. There are a few, and oscillating was the front runner. If I had to say, collectively who had more positive results. When you're selecting a movement type, it really does boil down to, in my experience, preference. So back in the research days, when a lot of these studies were evolving, vertical has higher frequencies. So oscillating, how fast it moves, is slower than vertical, but it moves farther. You have much more movement, slower speed in oscillating. Vertical plates have much higher frequencies, but much smaller amplitude values. And when I say they don't really exist anymore, I'm going to turn it in right now. For those of you that have a Rumblex model, or you have a turbo model, or for those of you, as I said, in the spirit of today's session, if you're researching and you're trying to find a vertical plate, there's not a lot of them out there for a reason. Pulsation is more the modern term for vertical plates. Pulsation is, as far as definition, is a straight movement of up and down. It's the little wavy two squiggly lines on any of Lifepro's models. The biggest difference between vertical and pulsation is the amount of amplitude that it generates. So right now, standing on Lifepro's on this model with pulsation moving, I feel a very slight resonance, tickling. Vertical, just because of the way that the vibration moves, it tends to, you feel it a little bit more in the nose and the ears. The resonance travels further up the body. If you bend your knees, just like in oscillating, your body will suppress, but you never really get away from that buzz tickle. And the pulsation has anywhere from about 0.5 to maybe 1 millimeter of movement up and down. Oscillating is upwards of 9 millimeters, 10, 12 in some of the old models. So much more amount of movement. And what that amount of movement is, or what's so important about it, is that's how far the muscles have to respond and react, to keeping you stable and upright perpetually on this plate. So pulsation in today's world is a very, this is going to sound negative, but it's not. it's a watered down version of the original vertical plates. The original vertical plates were capable of like 4 to 6 millimeters of amplitude. They moved a great amount. The pulsation in today's world at 0.5 to 1 millimeter, it's more of a therapeutic setting. Really kind of an, maybe an entry level when you're first starting out, you're dealing with something really chronic. It's really nice for neuropathy, but I would call it very much more of a light massage than a fundamental movement. If you're looking for those fitness gains, long-term growth, oscillating by far, you have much more room to grow. You have many more factors that you personally can manipulate for your own preference for what you're doing at the time. Vertical is a nice to have, but I tend to refer to, or pulsation, I tend to refer to it more as an added feature, an added bonus. The other type of movement that is available is lateral. Lateral is a complete horizontal movement. Frequencies are very similar to oscillating, as is amplitude. It's just a different plane of movement. Not as much research. Some people love their lateral. It is not my fave movement. I come from a place of science, and my background is rooted in oscillating and vertical plates. Lateral came much later. I honestly think somebody out there said, hey, we should make a plate that moves this way. So somebody did, and now they're everywhere. So it's nice to have some variety if you're using your plates for, daily use, a couple times a day for symptom stuff, pain relief, swelling. It is nice to have some variety. This is going to lead nicely into my next, common question, which is, well, now that I know there's 3 kinds of different movements in all these models, what is the best plate for what you want to do? What's the best plate for me? So the best plate, as I said, if I had to say movement type, it's easy. I recommend oscillating above. If you had to pick one movement type, absolutely go with oscillating. It's but hands down superior on things like balance and stability, very short-term, immediate effects on that. And that's kind of a precursor to some of the longer-term stuff like weight loss and bone density, is getting that balance and stability going. It has larger amplitudes, as I said, so it tends to, I feel, have long-term more advantages in the amount of movement that those muscles are required to respond to. And guess what? They tend to be more affordable to get into. There's really only a handful of medical grade plates still available. Oscillating tends to be a quieter movement than its vertical counterparts. And I think that's a lot of the reason, that you see them more in the spas and some of those places, because you don't want a loud sound. Vertical tends to be louder. But the real reason oscillating, regardless of the research, regardless of what I may say, oscillating feels more natural. It's how we walk across the floor. And most of you out there seeking a plate are not really using it for some specific training purpose regime. You want to move and feel better. You do want to get some fitness goals. And most of you are coming from a place of not exercising for purpose. So, it gets very confusing when everybody's telling you why this one's best or that one's best. So let me give you the easiest tip to help you decide. So oscillating for sure. If you are not an exercise guru and you want simplicity, go with basic oscillating movement. Don't worry about the pulsation, the lateral. If you have a little more curiosity, a little more budget, and kind of have a dedicated space, a larger model that offers more movements will cost more and be heavier and bigger for a couple of reasons. Each movement type requires its own motor. So when companies are like, oh yeah, we got like 3 motors, so we're better than that one that's got 1. It's kind of a silly statement because it's directly related to how many different types of movements the plate has. So if it has singular oscillating, you're going to have 1 motor and 1 set of components. If you have oscillating and pulsation, you're going to have 2 motors, 2 sets of components. If you have oscillating pulsation, and lateral, you're going to have 3 motors and 3 sets of components. So you can't fit all of that into something this size that weighs 11 pounds. Okay. So you're never going to see a compact plate that does what the larger plates do. It's not a sales pitch. There's more hardware, there's more construction, there's more motors. So understand that first. And motor size is a whole other complicated discussion. But anybody saying, well, they got a smaller motor size, I've seen more motors burn out because they're too big for what we're trying to accomplish here. This isn't a treadmill. That's a separate conversation if anyone's curious about that. But a lot of people don't realize, why the Romblex or the turbos, the Hoverts, why they're heavier, why they tend to be bigger. And it's because the more movements you have, the more components, the more investment, if you will, and the more weight. And this is also sometimes the reason a lot of people own 2 or 3 plates. So if you have a dedicated space, you're not planning on moving around a whole lot, absolutely, if budget allows, having that variety of additional movements and features is a great thing to consider. If budget is very, very limited, and you're looking at something more compact, the smaller a machine gets, the less likely it's going to be suitable for hardcore fitness type stuff. So a smaller plate is and Lifepro's brought a whole range. I would not personally go smaller than the Waver Mini if you are planning on doing lots of standing and fitness, whether that's now or down the road. If you plan to progress with the plate and do workouts on it, I would not go smaller than the Waver Mini. I know many of you are using the plates that are smaller. You got to start somewhere. But when you do get under about, and everyone's different, but once you get under about 20 pounds, the plates become a little tippy. I weigh 125, 130 pounds, and something that weighs, like 15% of my body weight. If my technique is not good, I may tip it. I've seen people do it with planks. I've had people flip this way, that way. So, this is ideal as a complement to this, or maybe this is a travel machine, or maybe this is the seated use machine. Maybe you're just dying to get started and you really, really want something and a compact model is all that you can afford. I get it, but don't be disappointed when you hear me talking about, this being more suitable for long-term fitness stuff. It's just a logical progression. So think about where you're at right now. If you are doing a lot of symptom management, I think you'll find even if you do start with a small machine, it's very rare you don't, every plate has its own purpose and appeal. These are great for seated use beside the bed, in front of the couch at night. Maybe this one's in the workout room. So, it's not always all the features and it's not always budget. Think the one tip on top of go basic oscillating is if you want to physically be able to move it around on your own, you want to use it in different places throughout the course of the day, make sure it's manageable. And if you go with a basic oscillating machine, you tend to have more luck moving the thing around. And sometimes too many bells and whistles if you're not an exercise guru. I'm an exercise guru now, but I didn't used to be. I like simple. I like, I don't like a whole lot of lights and buzzes and things I got to connect. Thank you guys. You're being very, very patient. I'm going to get to one final point and then I'm going to invite questions. So, it's never a yes or no answer with me, and I've covered a few of these, but I want to just circle back briefly to the topic of stigmas and myths. And I've already discussed a couple. Probably the biggest myth, if I were to say is the safety piece, which I touched on earlier on. There's a lot of companies selling other things. There's a lot of medical people and trainers out there that simply, due to similar terminology, they get the workplace and the occupational stuff mixed up and make assumptions. And like I say, in my years of using this, there really have been no more effects than over exercising. So if you've got your safety questions, bring them towards me. But there are some people that just vibration plates are not safe. And I hear that from time to time. And, based on what? Explain this to me. So the second myth I want to talk about is a little bit more user related, which I'll get into more next week. But is that you just stand here and the machine does everything for you. I mean, you can, but I don't want you being disappointed. The myth behind these machines of where you just stand here for 10 minutes, 3 times a week, started as somebody's marketing pitch years ago. The 10 minutes, 3 times a week is some research protocol where, we got in a car, we went somewhere 3 times a week, we stood on the thing for 10 minutes and, I was sleeping better, or I was pooping better, or I was building more bone density. Started somewhere like that. In my private groups, I've got people using these machines 10, 15 times a day, but it might be for 1 to 2 minutes to manage some pain. I've got some of you that are only using it once, twice a week to complement other things that you're doing. So I don't want you thinking you can't just stand here. But for those of you that are buying it on the sole purpose, thinking, this is all you got to do to lose 60 pounds, understand, even in the vibration plate world, what you do on it has a direct correlation with the benefits you're going to see mid and long term. And I'm going to get into the benefits specifically more in detail next week and some positions to complement those. Another stigma, kids can't use vibration plates. Why not? Are kids allowed to run and jump and be active? I, for one, think they need more of that. The kids can't use vibration plates, and the kids can't use treadmills, ellipticals, whatever it is. Probably came years ago from some gym that decided, what, our liability insurance doesn't cover like anybody under 16 or 12 or whatever it may be. More often than not, just like a medical concern, it's not a matter of whether kids can or cannot use a machine. It's whether it's appropriate to be having that conversation because, we're here to sell equipment, perhaps, versus be your medical provider. So from someone that does support many, many, many pediatric users, particularly those dealing with cerebral palsy, I have a group. Kids need activity. There's nothing wrong with kids being active. If you are dealing with a medical concern, you should absolutely, just like my contraindications, you should speak with your care provider, your PT, your doctor. And if they're not versed on vibration plates, there's probably more research on kids using vibration plate than the general public. It's a huge area of study, especially when you're trying to stimulate neurological effects, reduce spasticity. Like there's a whole bunch of different things that symptom wise the plate is an effective tool, but it offers weight bearing activity. So for those that are dealing with medical concerns, perhaps you're dealing with paralysis, those concerns are different when you're young versus then when you're 70. So the plate, whether you're using it seated in a wheelchair, a lift, or maybe it's the opposite end of the spectrum. Maybe your kid's a soccer player and he needs to warm up before he goes to the game. Or maybe he needs to recover after. There's absolutely nothing wrong being active as a child. And again, I for one think they need more of it. What isn't appropriate is like any other individual out there, me giving you advice based on I don't know your kid. I don't know what activities they do now, if the food is there. So, even though it may be a child, awesome idea to maybe, take them to the gym with you, book a session with the trainer or, a nutritionist, someone that can, sometimes it's better or it's easier to get your kids into good habits, activity wise, when it's not coming from mom or dad. So I know my kids enjoy some of my trainer friends, and there's no one way to use a vibration plate. There's no one way to use a set of weights. Sometimes it's nice to have different feedback, but for anything from physical activity to social or mental concerns, I've got kids that'll use this to calm their anxiety before they go to school. There's autism, Downs, muscular dystrophy. Like there's so many studies out there that you'll see online. It's how do I translate it to this? And it's because activity is beneficial for kids just like us. So yes, they absolutely can use machines, but seek qualified guidance. I'm really putting my butt out there today, aren't I? Outside of that, I think I'm going to stop on the stigmas. Anything you ever hear or may have heard, or anything that a vibration plate has ever been caused of doing, please, as I beg you, give me the opportunity to dig into it further. I don't want you being fearful. This could very well be the most viable tool out there that you take home to improve your overall physical and mental health. And it's very, very rare that with modifications, there isn't some way that we can find a way for you to benefit from this and progress with it moving forward. So I hope that rambling was enough. I'm going to kill a few lights a little bit. And now it's time for questions. I rambled for a whole hour. You guys, I'm so sorry. So yes, next week I'm going to touch on more specifically benefits. I will still talk a little bit about pulsation and oscillating and lateral and just based on some of the experience I have. We're going to talk about how to get started if you're a new user or a returning user. We're going to talk about some of the common stuff that happens to new users, the itch, the energy, those type of things. And we'll talk a little bit more about how long and how often is appropriate with some common goals that people are looking to accomplish. Okay. So let me get back here because I had some really exciting questions and I need some coffee. Hang on. All right. So I said hi to my Vicky. Hello, Tina. Hello. Vicky said we can hear you. Awesome. Susan, I was blurry. It happens from time to time. It really annoys me. I wish I could soften it a little bit for some of the fine lines and spots, but not that fuzzy. Susan says fix. Thank you. Sandy, I'd love to hear recommendations for above knee amputees. I'm going to circle back to that. Hi, Betsy. Nice to see you, girl. I'm here late, but here. We'll catch what I missed later. Looks like a great session. Life got in the way. I say that all the time. And you know that I tend to ramble. So I'm sorry, guys. I've been doing this a really long time. And sometimes it's hard for me to dumb it down because in the morning I might be dealing with like a children's hospital and it's like post-spinal surgery. And then this morning it's just, I need to get my neuropathy feeling better. So I tend to be, I overdo it on the conservative stuff because I know so many of you are dealing with chronic issues. So the knee amputee thing, 2 ways that a plate can be super effective. And if you're still with me, Brandy, and I haven't talked you to sleep, are you or are you not currently using have you got a leg? Have you got something that a brace, something that you're currently wearing? I personally, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but earlier when I was talking about the types of movement, again, you're never going to find a study on some of this stuff, but I had both of these machines in my studios for years. And I did have a couple of amputees that came together. One was above the knee, one was just below the knee, and had something from elsewhere in the body removed and added. So a heel from the foot. So the braces were different. The kid, they were both kids. They were in a car accident. Were different. I was pretty close to right after the surgery had happened. So there was a period of, using the vibration plate to assist in just expediting recovery, reducing inflammation, pain, sleep aid, those type of things. And then later on, it was, strength training and muscular activity, more so on the side that's doing all the work. Depending on how recovery is going, the only concern I have working with amputees is how recent it was. So, I mean, if this is something you've been dealing with like a long time and it's done and you're past that period, it's different than recent. I find when I'm dealing with amputees, you can have phantom and pain things for years and years afterwards. And this is going to be a bold statement, but when I'm working with amputees, there's something about the machines that just makes your central nervous system go back to the drawing board. So the two that I've had much more experience since, but the two earlier on are so fresh in my brain. One had lots of phantom issues that were very emotional, very painful. And the plate was more of a soothing, calming thing. They ended up having a plate at home and using it daily for that reason. The other didn't have the pain, the phantom things to the same degree, but had a weaker body beginning, so that the strength training, there was more where I was adding weights and different things to just build up the strength quicker on the good side that was doing all the supportive work. If it's a recent thing, what was also very different was the supports. So one was where the amputee was below the knee. They were able to use that scooter style instead of a crutch nowadays. The other was using crutches. So it also, unfortunately, when you use crutches, sometimes you get other problems like sore ribs and shoulders. So, how I trained them was still very much an individual thing, even though they were both dealing with an amputee situation. Sandy is 35 years old. So I guess I would be curious if you are active now. If there are, if there's certain goals that you're looking to accomplish, it would just really be a matter of modifications. There's absolutely no reason you can't use a vibration plate. If your range of motion is good, there's an advantage that a vibration plate may present to the amputee side. So, you can do, I got to do a visual here. This is for Sandy. So follow along. And you know what? Amputee side, this is applicable. If you have a problem on one side or the other side, you got one side that's doing all the work. It's doing all the compensating anyways. So stand on one leg. If you need something to hang on to, put a chair or a ladder or something in front of you. So the good side has been doing all of the work. So, maybe you've had, I don't know, a hip replacement, a knee replacement. If you're able to bear weight, right, in a recent situation on the good leg, maybe you can just stand and put one little toe on it. With an amputee situation, you can do all kinds of strength stuff. I find if you want to stand with your brace or your prosthetic, oscillating is sometimes okay. It really depends on how much movement you feel in the point of connection. Vertical, I don't know. My two users by far did not prefer vertical, but I was dealing with much, much higher energy equipment than today's pulsation. What the other advantage of what a vibration plate can offer, so I'm not sure which leg it is, but if you're amputee above the knee, I'm going to move this out a bit. Massaging it directly. So I need like a mat. Hang on. So like a yoga mat. Okay. And I'm going to warn you, Sandy. This is a 35-year-old injury. Guess what? Post-traumatic stress. Things like that linger for a long time too. And, there's this whole emotion code thought about how things are trapped in our fascia. So I want to warn you, when you start working the leg directly, why would you want to do this? Awesome way to get some circulation in there directly. I would recommend, depending on the plate that you're using, start with pulsation if you have it. If you do not have pulsation, move to the center of an oscillating plate and crank the speed up. It's going to be very similar to pulsation, but you want very fast, but very little amount of movement. You're probably going to feel like a big pins and needles or an itchiness as circulation and lymph improve, and they improve immediately. That's kind of a perpetual benefit. Keep it brief, 1 to 2 minutes, depending on your ability to get down on the floor and up. You and your height, you may like something more like this, where you've got the thigh. I'm 5'10", so like my butt cheeks hanging off the end, but you could get up to the top of where it's been removed. You could probably get that whole leg on there. You can roll it around on there. Experiment. You are only limited by your imagination and your range of motion. Sandy, tell me, are there any lingering symptoms? I mean, it's been 35 years. Is there anything kind of still pissing you off that you're dealing with? Let me know. Where can you find examples of exercises on something like that? That's me personally talking. That's not something Lifepro would have in a manual. But what you could Google is or if there's exercises that you're doing now or you're supposed to be doing now, those would be things to try on the plate. So the plate is just an environment. What exercises you do on it are really much more an individual custom thing. So, Google, amputee exercises. I'm not sure if it's left or right leg. Or if you do have a therapist or someone that you're working with, if they have some floor-based exercises that they're recommending you do, you can mimic them on the vibration plate. And like I say, just give yourself something for stability. Ideally, if you're working just the side, the supportive side, ditch the hardware. Just go as you are. And of course, obviously for massage, and just start getting a feel for it. Once you feel a little bit more comfortable, try it with your supportive hardware. It really is kind of a preference. Phantom pains and back weakness. Okay, so I went off on a tangent there. For those, I'm assuming everyone knows what phantom pains are, but neurologically, when we have trauma of this nature to our body, even though we know things aren't there anymore, our brain remembers that it was, and it remembers that trauma. And the warning I want to give you when you're dealing with trauma of this nature, and sometimes it's surgery, sometimes it's the loss of a family member. There's different things that give us trauma. A vibration plate has been known to release and relax fascia trauma. So sometimes you go through what I call, there's no scientific term for it, but let's call it the emotional detox. So all this pain this phantom stuff, it's bottled up crud from 35 years ago. You got to get it out. So if you find yourself sitting there like bawling your face off, or laughing hysterically, or, just extreme norms as far as emotion, it's not always a bad thing. Most of my most emotional, stressful days finish with me sitting on a vibration plate, bawling my face off. It's my coping mechanism. But I just want to warn you, because again, my experience is probably a little different than most, because I just had such an amazing client base in the studio, and I had the best equipment on the face of the earth to play with for 10 years before anybody even heard about vibration plates. So because I had relationships with my local families and our local children's hospital, I just got opportunity to experience these situations a little bit sooner on. The two amputees that I worked with, this would be almost 18 years ago, just so you know, Sandy, were twin boys that were about 14 years old. And they use it regularly, not always, still to this day. Not always for exercise, like the strength stuff that we were working on at the time. But for that, it grounds them. It's their emotional go-to. And, some people seek these plates out for physical benefits, but a lot of times it's the mental wellness and the mental health that you really never expected to get from it. They absolutely have a yin and a yang relationship, and it just happens quicker on a vibration machine. It accelerates the effects. I hope that makes sense. Sandy, I guess my last question would be, do you have a plate now, or is this something you're just doing some homework on? And there's a little bit of a delay. So maybe answer that one to me if you haven't left already. And if you have left, you can always leave a comment. While I'm waiting for Sandy to reply, I want to thank you for joining me. I got a little deep today on certain topics, but there's been some really related questions in the VIP group lately. So I just want to make sure, if you ever have a concern, it's never a black and white answer from me. And because, there's not, there's not half of you are like this and half of you are like that. There's a lot of variety. And very often it's just more a matter of understanding what you're working with as far as your machine and its capabilities, but also your own. What are your tolerances? What are you able to do? What shouldn't you be doing, and adhering to those? A vibration plate is simply a tool to make the exercise stuff you're supposed to be doing a little easier. And in a lot of ways, for many of my chronic users, it simply makes movement possible when many of you are just unable to move regularly on your own for whatever reason. Sandy says yes, and have been using for a month. So have you had any spooks, or is any of the stuff I'm saying today making sense or resonating? I'm sure you've experimented a little bit. Um, have you had any emotional or increase in, sometimes it's an increase in sensation. I don't know if you're dealing with probably some nerve damage, some scar tissue down there, but it's not uncommon to regain sensation short or long term as the body's systems, that blood flow, that lymph improves on, and keep consistent using it regularly is really the key to any of these things. I hope that makes sense. Anyone else that's watching this on a recorded basis, if you're in that early stage and you got questions and you're getting different answers, or you can't find the answers, please feel free to tag me at Debby with a Y, and I'll happily get back to you. So for lymphatic drain, okay, so you're probably having swelling intermittent from time to time. I have a whole separate group that just supports lymphatic issues, lymphedema, lipedema, a vibration plate, more than anything else on the face of this earth, is an easy way to move lymph. What your range of motion allows you to do, whether you're standing or seated or getting down on it. So it's very, very important. If you haven't done this already, Sandy, it's really easy to overdo it because it feels so good and so soothing while you're doing it. If you have congested lymph or you have compromised lymph, especially in that area, sometimes you're able to dissipate some of the swelling, but maybe it moves somewhere else. So if there's blockages elsewhere, or your system is just, sluggish and ineffective to begin with, sometimes you have pooling in other areas because you've moved more volume than your body is able to support. So a month, you're not really a newbie anymore, but if you're finding that you're retaining swelling or you're becoming more swollen at this point, it's probably too long or too often. When you move, lymph moves. So a lot of mine that are dealing with really awful lymph issues are the ones I'm referring to that are using it 5-10 times a day. But maybe it's just for a minute before you head out to go get the mail, or maybe it's for 2 minutes before you get up to go make a sandwich. Where you lack the ability to move regularly, you don't want to put the leg on to just walk across the house and back. There's lots of ways that a plate can get things moving more effectively than you could manually on your own. And the direct massage, putting the leg directly on there, is a great way to sort of get that target area a little bit more effectively. I would also suggest doing a little bit of lymph prep. So if you're dealing with a sluggish lymph, I nag people in my group, and I've posted this in Lifepros, but and no one has coined the phrase, but lymphatic therapists prep lymph. So there's 6, or some speak 8 or 9 pathways that you can just, sort of pre-prep your body in those areas before you take the surge of movement that the plate gives you, to just help the body be prepared and more open to handle that capacity. Sandy says, please tag me on any information. Thank you so much. I will do that. I'm going to start wrapping up here because many of you are probably snoozing from Debbie's ramble. Next week, as I said, I'll get more into, like, I'm a new user. What, these are the benefits I want to accomplish. This is what I've read. As I said, in particular for today's, if you did have something you wanted me to dig into, a fear, a claim, anything like that, give me the opportunity of dropping me a link so I can look a little bit deeper into that for you. And, like any woman, I like being right. So I try to dig in and make sure that I am. It's very satisfying. But when it comes to vibration plates, it's pretty rare that I'm not able, if I haven't read what you're quoting already. In 20 years, as I said, I've never had anyone more than overdo it. Understand that what that means. I'm going to drop some getting started videos for those of you that are curious, some links to some of my other recommended videos. And I will probably be doing the same time next week, Tuesday night, maybe Wednesday. I'll see how it goes for part 2. And I look forward to seeing you then. Have a great rest of your night, guys. Anyone following along, feel free to just tag me at Debby with a Y. That way, for sure, I get a notification. And for those of you considering vibration plates or something to complement them, Lifepro, of course, has up to 30% off for back to school right now. It's a perfect time of year to get back in the habit or get a habit going, that routine. Sometimes it's the chaos, oh, I didn't get to this today or that today because A vibration plate, you don't have to always do 10 minutes. You don't always have to do 15. Sometimes 5-10 minutes, broken into 5 or 6 short sessions throughout the day is just as effective, especially if you're looking at things like Sandy's talking about, the targeting lymph, circulation, that symptom management piece, guys. Use your machine as often as you like, but keep the intensity and the time short. It's not always about a workout. Thank you for joining me, you guys. Have a great rest of your week and enjoy your Tuesday night. Thanks for joining me.